Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And when Stephanie asked us to tell, what does soul mean to you? My response was like automatic. Soul proves to me that God is faithful. And so it just came so easily to me that all of this has happened because God is faithful. And I wanted to share a Bible verse with you. In Deuteronomy 32, verse 4, the Bible tells us, He is the rock, His works are perfect, and all His ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong, upright and just is He. And all of us struggle in our faith from time to time, and maybe even all the time. But whether that means taking time to read your Bible, or knowing how to pray, or finding the right church, or really trusting God with our lives, whatever our struggles are, everyone has dealt with those struggles at one point or another. And when we struggle in our faith, we need to remember that God is faithful. We need to remember His calling. 1 Corinthians 1:9 tells us, God is faithful who has called you into fellowship with His Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. So first of all, God has called us to be His children. And if we're here today, God has called us to be part of Soul, to support Soul. We are not here by accident. And almost 30 years ago, which I can't even believe I'm saying that, but almost 30 years ago, God planted a little seed in my heart. It was back then, I lived in Ohio, which is where I was born and lived the first part of my life. And my children were really little then. And my mom started volunteering at a maternity home. And I thought, what a cool thing. And I thought, I would like to do something like that someday when my kids are older and when I have more time. And I just thought, someday, that's a cool thing. So God planted that little seed all those years ago. And my mom is still in Ohio. I wish that she could be here to celebrate with us today, and especially since tomorrow is Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all of you who are our moms, or grandmothers, or both, or great-grandmothers. We have one of those here today. And sometimes it seems like everything goes back to mom, doesn't it? And mothers are so important in our lives. So fast forward from that tiny seed all those years ago to around 2012. And my children were grown by then. And we had moved to Charleston. And then one Sunday morning, I was at Seacoast Church, and they passed out these baby bottles. And they were collecting money for the Low Country Pregnancy Center. And I was like, I didn't even know that there was such a thing. So that was a pretty cool thing. So God was watering that little seed. And I thought about it, and I made a donation, and I occasionally prayed about it for about a year. And it was still brewing. And then God did one of those funny God things like He does. And my husband and I were watching HGTV of all things, and they had a dream house. Every year they give away a dream house. It was on Kiowa Island. And I thought how cool it would be to win that dream house on Kiowa Island. And my husband said, I don't want to live on Kiowa. It's too far away from everything. It's too remote. I don't want to live out there. And this just popped right out of my mouth, and I don't even know where it came from. But I said, fine, if I win the house, then I'll just make it a maternity home for moms, for pregnant women. And I was like, okay. So it was all brewing for all this time. And God was working. And so I entered that contest to win that house on Kiowa Island every single day. And it was like a 3-month period. I never missed a day. I was totally dedicated to this. And then some lady in Tennessee won the house. But it was just God watering that seed. And then the little seed was starting to grow into a seedling. And then I actually really did start praying about it. And God provided the courage for me to visit the Low Country Pregnancy Center. I was just letting this brew forever, But He provided the courage. And I learned more about what the pregnancy center actually did. And Faye Hill was the CEO then. And she said that the pregnant women didn't need a retreat, which I was initially thinking of a place where women could decide, do they want to parent or do they want to place their child for adoption, was my initial thought. But she said they don't really need a retreat. They need housing. She said there's a huge need for housing in this area. And okay, if that's what the need is, then we'll go that way. But it was interesting that it was just like the maternity home that my mom had worked at so long ago when the seed was initially planted. So I was working a full-time job then, decided to take Friday afternoons off and go to Low Country Pregnancy Center, take the classes, do the training, and start counseling. And so I learned that Faye was right, and the housing and the financial concerns were the main reason that most of the women considered abortion. And they needed support, not just with housing and finances, but they needed emotional support and spiritual support. And when they had no one to trust except for God, they needed to know that God was faithful. So that's the key. They need to know that He is faithful, and I needed to know that too. So I want all of you to be encouraged that God gives us our calling. He calls us to whatever it is in our life that He is calling you to. And He determines the timing and He determines the purpose. So the first thing is to remember your calling. Remember God's calling. And the second thing is to remember God's confidence. Because it's scary to go out there and try to follow your calling, whether it's being a new mom or whether it's whatever it is that being a Christian isn't always an easy thing to do. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 6 tells us, "But Christ is faithful as the Son over God's house, and we are His house, if indeed we hold firmly to our confidence and the hope in which we glory." So God provides the calling and the purpose, and God also provides the confidence and the hope. So back in 2014, which was 10 years ago, Christian organizations that were filing for nonprofit status were being turned down. I don't know if any of you remember that or even aware that that was going on, but this was a thing back then. It was a prejudice, against Christian organizations that they were being not allowed to get 501c3 status. So that was going on. Also, I was told that there were no maternity homes in Charleston because no one could afford the insurance. It's like, okay, and then there was an organization that I was helping with that helped single moms, and they were closing because they didn't have enough support. So all those things were going on that were very negative. But, if God is for us, who can be against us, right? Amen. So, God provided that little bit of confidence. And then He provided things that we actually needed. He provided a CPA. He volunteered for free to file a 501c3, and guess what? It got approved because it was just when the tide was turning. Right then was when the tide was turning, and I was amazed that it was approved. I shouldn't have been amazed because, it's God, but I was. And then that was when Soul was born in 2014. So that seedling started to grow a little bit stronger stem, got a few more leaves on it, and it grew into a plant that day. It was a real thing now. It was actually real because God is faithful. Then God provided a mentor to advise Soul's direction into a support group called Soul Sisters. Because no one wants to support an organization that's just going to do something someday. Someday we're going to build a maternity home. Nobody's going to give money for that. Nobody's going to support that financially or really any other way. And they need to see fruit. So we started Soul Sisters, and providing that service gave people something to donate toward. And God provided volunteers to help, and Charleston Baptist Church in West Ashley offered free meeting space. So it was announced, publicly, and had it all set up, and volunteers, and no one showed up. So we had like 4 or 5 meetings in Charleston set up at Charleston Baptist Church, and no one showed up. So then God had to provide encouragement, and He provided a new space at the Low Country Pregnancy Center. They offered a space there for free again. And by that time I had become a staff member. And pregnant women knew this place. Sometimes the women were afraid to go to a church, but they would go to the pregnancy center. That was someplace they knew that they felt comfortable. And they showed up for a free meal and for baby supplies. They showed up for mentoring support, and they even stayed for the Bible study. So that was a bonus. And Soul had become truly the sanctuary of unborn life. And that seed, now grown into a plant, was starting to produce fruit, finally. That was back in 2014. In 2018, Soul hosted its first Tea with Soul. That's why this is our 7th Tea with Soul. The first few years we didn't have a fundraiser yet. We were just kind of getting our feet in the water, And so God provided the fruit, And people saw the fruit, and he turned their hearts to become donors because God is faithful. And then enough money was raised at that fundraiser to provide rental assistance to help a homeless woman who was pregnant to get out of the homeless shelter and into an apartment of her own. And I have to say that with the help of 180 Place, we worked together on that. But Soul had provided quite a bit of her assistance. And that year, Soul grew into a fruit-producing sapling, providing benefits to many women and children. And to operate Soul full-time, I then resigned from LPC, and I even got a little teeny tiny paycheck from Soul. So it was a huge growth in the organization, and that's all because God is faithful. And every journey is different, and this journey might not be as spectacular as another faster growing organization. But the important thing to remember is that our calling and our confidence and our hope all come from God. And then we need to also thirdly remember God's consistency. In the book of Joel, chapter 2, verse 23, he tells us, "Be glad, people of Zion. Rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given you the autumn rains because he is faithful. He sends you abundant showers, both autumn and spring rains, as before." So I really clung to that, as before. So God has been providing all along. He provides all along. He is consistent. And then came 2020. And then the pandemic that threw the whole world into a crisis was a crisis for Soul as well. And we couldn't hold Soul Sisters meetings that year because of the pandemic. And we couldn't hold Tea with Soul. We had to do it online, which was far less successful than having an in-person event like this. So that was more difficult. And then on top of all that, my husband and I felt drawn to move to North Carolina to be closer to our COVID baby first grandchild. It definitely was a COVID baby. So we were like, well, we should go. So that September at the board meeting, when I announced that we were considering moving, we had pretty much decided we were moving at that point, the board recommended an exit plan. I was pretty much stunned. Just a second. They said, no one will do what you do for what little you're paid. And I'm like, well, I do. There's other people out there like me, And again, if God is for us, who can be against us? And God hadn't brought Soul this far to give up and close down. So that was when determination and God's confidence came in. And God reminded me of anyone that I knew along the way that I had met who I thought might possibly be interested in carrying the torch. And I came up with a list of 10 people that God had prompted me to think of. And so I looked at the list and thought myself, who are the five most likely people who would be willing to do this and carry this on if I left? And so I contacted those 5 people, and guess what? They all said no. so like, okay, who am I to know who's the right person? So I had some 5 more names. So I looked at those 5 names, and one of those people was Stephanie Potter. And she said yes. And you know why? Because God is faithful. And we just have to keep sticking it out and be persistent and just trust that God is faithful because he is faithful. And that November in 2020, Soul hired Stephanie. And then after kind of a whirlwind of training during the holidays and I'm looking for a house out of state and the market's awful and all of that was going on, Stephanie stepped in as the executive director, and Soul has never been in better hands. Because where I have a background in accounting and I've started a business and I knew that part of it, Stephanie has a master's degree in social work and she has extensive experience in running a nonprofit and case management and skills that I don't have. So she was exactly what Soul needed, and God sent her to carry forth. And God moved me to the next phase of my life as a writer and a grandmother. My grandma's name is Gigi. And my grandson is now 3 and a half almost. And 2 weeks ago, I had my second grandchild that's a kind of a cool thing too, because she was due May 26th. And my daughter-in-law was high risk, so they said she'd probably not go until May 17th. So I'm thinking, am I even gonna be able to go to the tea? Because, I'm the babysitter for Jackson. So I thought, what am I going to do? Well, God took care of that too, because my granddaughter was born early, 2 weeks ago. She's 2.5 weeks old now, perfectly healthy. Her name is Ellie Mae, and I am here, so God is faithful. And now, I know, now Soul has grown from a sapling into a tree of life. And the tree has many branches. We have 4 staff members now, many, many volunteers, and we even have a nest in our tree, our maternity home, to house pregnant women and their babies. And I want to thank Stephanie for her phenomenal work and her wisdom in our day-to-day operations. She's made such a difference and grown our organization so much. A special thanks also to Leah McAvoy. I don't see her at the moment, she's probably busy. And she has done an exemplary job as administrative director, administrative assistant, and caterer extraordinaire. She prepared all of the food for us today. And Leah has a degree in public relations, and she keeps everything organized and receives and delivers all the donated baby supplies. And thanks also to Diana Johnson, who is our mentoring coordinator, and she is a licensed practical nurse as well as a certified childbirth educator. And when our Nest client went into labor in the middle of the night, Diana was on the phone with her, talking her through as the client was waiting for a ride to the hospital. So she has been just indispensable, and she leads our Soul Sisters group and has such a gentle spirit and a big heart for the women that she mentors. And thank you. And then more recently, God has blessed us with our newest and our only full-time staff member, Nefertiti Smalls. And she is our administrative director, which I told her I think she should be the client director because it's more of a client-related job. She is a certified trauma recovery coach and a certified mental health coach with training in domestic violence and mandated reporting and more. She's also finishing her degree in psychology. Nefertiti answers the client line, helps women in crisis, and guides them through applying for Soul services. She provides case management, mentoring, and oversees all the client services and the Nest. And her knowledge, experience, and professionalism have taken Soul to another level again. Thank you. I'd also like to remember Christina Soto, who just recently resigned for family reasons, but as our client coordinator, Christina served Soul's ministry for the past 1.5 years and then just recently left for family. We're so grateful for all of our staff, and grateful and thankful too also for all of our volunteers who are all working behind the scenes right now and all the time. And I wanted to just kind of give you a little bit of a vision into our board of directors, because our board of directors started out with me, my husband, and my daughter. It was just like, that's it. And now we have this wonderful board, very professional, who work behind the scenes as well. And our secretary, Leanne, I don't think she's here today, is she? Okay, Leanne was here earlier but couldn't be here right now. She has a master's degree also in social work, so she has all this wonderful background and experience with nonprofits. She also was helping a nonprofit that serves single moms. Has wonderful experience, and she also is a mentor. Our treasurer, Paula Register, has a master's degree in accounting, which is wonderful for a treasurer, and she also has been a director of a nonprofit, so she's very experienced and professional as well. And our vice president, Crystal Purvis, Esquire, has a Juris Doctor degree and is an attorney for the South Carolina Judicial Branch, which is amazing. So she has the legal experience and knowledge to help our board to make wise decisions. So it's just amazing to me how faithful God has been and how He has provided. And God is always faithful in the past, and all of us have been through hard stuff. And maybe we're going through hard stuff right now. We may have health or family concerns. We may be concerned about the economy or the political climate. And we may be hesitant to commit to volunteering our time or making a financial donation. But it's up to us as the Christians, the people of God, the faithful, to set an example of trusting God for the people like our clients who might be struggling with their faith. God provided every one of us to support this ministry and prove His faithfulness to those who need Him. God has been faithful in the past, He's faithful today in the present, and He will be faithful in the future. God keeps His promises to each one of us and to Soul. And He gives us a calling, a confident hope, and God is consistent because God is faithful. Let us close with Deuteronomy 7, verse 9. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. He is the faithful God, keeping his covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments. Thank you all for supporting Soul's ministry. Thank you for proving God's faithfulness by being here today. And thank you for being the heart and soul of Sanctuary of Our